Alright, we were back with more NBA coverage, and in this one I'll be covering the games that I watched on Saturday, which coincidentally enough happened to be both of the NBA Cup Semifinal games. Now to this point, they had been winding down the actual group play for this point, and so the stages were set for both teams with the Knicks, the Magic, the Spurs, and the Thunder all clinching their places in this specific bracket to lead eventually to the NBA Cup Final, which I believe is on Tuesday. So we start out with the first one, the Knicks and the Magic. Let's just say that already in this young NBA season, this is the fourth time these teams have been facing off against each other. And let's just say that in most of these cases, with the exception of the last one that I did end up talking about, the Magic won 124 to 107 with a monster fourth quarter themselves. But it's been competitive for most of the time that these teams have played against each other. And at least in this one, you appeared to have Paolo Banchero coming back from his injury. Most other guys were seemingly healthy coming into this, but you knew exactly what you were going to get in this, which is just a back and forth ordeal the entire time. And it did not fall short of expectations whatsoever. It was relatively close for the early stages of this game. And while I didn't watch the entire first quarter, it felt as though the Knicks were starting to pull away, at least from the time that I got myself into the game early in the second quarter. For one, you kind of just got what would be a theme of the entire night of basketball, to say the least. I mean, I just get in there and I see that De Silva has a bandage covering this part of his face. And I'm like, okay, what the hell happened for him to possibly be bleeding from that area and then have to get Band-Aids or whatever sort of first aid item to place here and cover it up. I was just so caught off guard by that, to be honest with you. But by this point in the game, the Knicks had actually been going on a 15-4 run. They started to get Karl Anthony Towns heated up, and they took great advantage on the defensive end of just forcing the Magic into very terrible shots, to say the least. And that would be something that would define their night as well. This was not and would not be the last major shooting slump they would have in this game. Especially when you look at how close this was. That could have been a devastating reason as to why things occurred as they did. However, a slight turnaround from them would force the Magic to, force the Knicks rather, to call a timeout here. One thing that they could say was consistent for them, and I don't even think people would expect it, was Jalen Suggs in this half. On a night where I could understand that Banchero would probably have a few struggles here and there if this was the very first game that he'd returned from injury in. He would be expected to take the game over, but honestly, it just wasn't his night to that point. And so in those cases, you're going to want to have other people step up. Jalen Suggs was actually playing like a perfect counter to Jalen Brunson's dynamic. I mean, Jalen Brunson coming into this game was averaging the most points per game out of anybody in NBA Cup play, and that would continue here through some of the same things he is always relying on. Like, you have to appreciate the man willing to, regardless of his stature, even as Josh Hart so bluntly said it. It's you have to give merit to that. The fact that he is that lethal of a scorer, and that no matter what, no matter who's guarding him, even Jalen Suggs at times decided to have that be the matchup, and he just bullied him into the paint, got to his spot near the rim for a close shot, or in the post, and went to fucking work consistently. And that kind of grit just cannot be taught. But it's a craft that he's been working at for years to this point. And to be with this Knicks team, he is currently, by the way, one of, I think, the top 4 players in terms of points per game average on the team. And while it's a short sample size, he's already second all time in that category. So it is warranted to have him completely take over at this point. But Suggs wasn't going to be outdone. I mean, his dynamic as well was also interesting. And the Magic would get some other great contributions as well, but this was mostly spurred by him. The Magic found their success more so as the game went on when they were able to get out in transition. And you saw that from Jalen Suggs numerous times, spurring that, at least towards the tail end of this first half. I mean, he himself had multiple occasions where he was going coast to coast or getting an inbounds pass and just straight up utilizing his speed with his football background, getting all the way down the court against a defense that wasn't even remotely set. He had favorable numbers for his liking. He just took it straight to the cup on numerous occasions to get buckets. Or another situation saw him just shoot it right over Jalen Brunson because fuck him. That's why he did it. And that kept the Magic in here the entire time. You also got some good work in from Jet Howard and Anthony Black as well, in cases, has continued to emerge as a quality piece for them. And I don't think people saw that coming. When he first entered the league, even with the struggles last year at the point guard position for the entire team, when Jalen Suggs was out with injury, and how inefficient it was at times. He seems to have figured it out a little bit. Now, also, Desmond Bane, you can't make some of his shots up. He just continued to lean on this reverse style and awkward arm angle release for multiple layups in this game. He didn't have success with every single one. Like, to end off the half, he airballed at the rim. But then you had other situations earlier in this stretch where he managed to get a fucking layup with his arm all the way stretched out. Managed to put it off the glass and into the basket. And I'm like, you're not expecting that man, and especially with his short and strong ass arms, to pull off moves like that or get any kind of reverse layup whatsoever. And while it will work against him at times, the Magic very much appreciated him being able to do it. But still, even with Jalen Suggs putting this work in, and even with the Knicks giving this up, they still managed to walk into the half with a 7-point lead. Despite, again, Jalen Suggs having his career high for points in any half with 25. Like, I'm telling you, he was going absolutely crazy. Absolutely crazy. Now, the second half would see more of the same in terms of just rough work for the Magic. Now, they tried to keep it close. They did. And they had, as the quarter went on, they had a slight, and I mean an ever so slight surge. Anthony Black continued it, getting a hell of a pass from Banchero off of a steal, and then going up, getting a dunk that barely trickled in, got an and one on that shot after drawing the foul, and Desmond Bane also kept them in it with a few buckets of his own. They actually had the game tied up, and then Bane managed to give them the lead. So the Magic, by keeping the Knicks off the glass as best as they could as well. We're dealing with a team in New York who, I think the broadcasters mentioned, they were averaging like 18.3 points per game in terms of second chance opportunities, or something like that. 16-4 run to compound a 7-2 Knicks run to start off that quarter. They were very much in the driver's seat in this one. And as long as they could continue their good shooting, if they could continue getting out in space against a fewer amount of players, They were going to be more than good in this game. However, they just hit a massive rut. A massive rut. I mean, yes, Jet Howard would make a shot for him, but then you allowed the Knicks to just get easy backdoor cuts time and time again. Jalen Brunson started hitting more of his shots because that's a given. And Mitchell Robinson as well just started to eat between crashing the glass, between literally packing the shit out of Anthony Black to end off the quarter. And then also, Josh Hart continued to be a steady force. Like, there was a play earlier in the half, the first half, that I glossed over. Like, he gets the rebound, gets out in transition, and throws a fucking crazy bounce pass to Mikal Bridges that ended up resulting in an easy two-pointer in transition as well. And in those sequences, the Knicks were able to beat the Magic at their own game. Not only did that continue here, but the Knicks would force the Magic at a point in this game to go just 4 of their last 21 on overall field goals. 4 of their last 21. It also hurt the Magic as well that despite Jalen Suggs' massive first half, he was banged up like crazy. I mean, I was concerned for the man. They go and address the sideline report coming out of the halftime break, okay? And as Liza Richardson, one of the sideline reporters for NBC. I might be seriously mistaken right now. That's my bad. But this person is interviewing Jalen Suggs, and he has tape all around his body, all near his groin area, all around his torso. It was fucking bad, and I was very confused as to what was going on. He went out instantly in the third quarter, sat for a while, and in the fourth quarter, they tried to sub him back in. Tried to have him muscle through it. He just could not. Like, there was a sequence. He gets to the line. He's going to shoot free throws, and he can barely walk over there. Ultimately, the Magic had to take him out of that game. And I think once that happened, I don't know, while they would, again, attempt to make something happen, the Knicks had them exactly where they wanted them. Josh Hart, man, people keep underestimating Josh Hart and what he can do. Like, again, as I've said before about him, he is a jack of all trades, master of none, particularly, if that's how you want to view it. Man, some of the finishes that he pulled off himself, like he got one later on in this game, he gets right at Wendell Carter Jr., puts it up at the rim, kind of contorts his body a little bit, and he manages to jackknife it in. You're not really expecting a person that small compared to Wendell Carter Jr. to pull it off, but that's okay. Josh Hart is definitely one of those kinds of players. And you figure if he's got one of the higher 2-point percentages, or had a season last year with one of the higher 2-point percentages, one can imagine that this is something that he would consistently work at, and surely it's paying off in real time. The Magic would try to make it close. They had a little spurt when Jace Richardson came into the game and got this down to single digits, but there was still enough distance there to where it's like, okay, you're not really going to do anything here. Mikal Bridges would essentially get the icing on the cake, and Karl-Anthony Towns as well would accentuate that even further to ultimately give the Knicks the 132 to 120 win here. Man, ultimately, those stretches between having that sparse shooting in the second quarter and ultimately in between the latter part of the third quarter and the early fourth, that shooting stretch alone completely took the magic out of it. And it was still close. It was still as advertised relative to how it's been this entire season between these two teams. But the Magic's defense was also something that could not be completely avoided here in terms of the impact it had on this game, or lack thereof. And Mosley, in one of the timeouts, they got him mic'd up and they had him addressing that. Like, hey, they're essentially getting us out of our element here, and we're not doing anything about it. We need to push back. We need to get out in transition and run as a team. And we need to show that defensive intensity to make them work for every single bucket. Just think about this for a second. The Knicks, even if offensive rebounds weren't that much of a factor in this game, they had 70 points in the paint, and they shot 60.7% from the field. In a 12-point ball game, they shot 60.7% from the field as a team. They didn't have to be that reliant on threes. In fact, the Magic made more threes than them. But if you're giving up all those high percentage looks, if you're allowing them to, again, outmatch you in terms of getting quality looks down low or on the run, you had no control of the pace in this one. And as a result, they ultimately suffered defeat here.
And eat the rest of those fucking oatmeal raisin fucking cookies too.
Alright. As for the numbers, Jalen Brunson would continue the NBA Cup masterclass for himself this season. And in fact, his 40 points and 8 assists on a crazy 16 of 27 shooting from the field would actually be the most points that any player this season, or I think any player in the actual history of the NBA Cup event, has put up in a semifinal or a final match. They just had no answer for him, and that's typically how it is. And Karl-Anthony Towns as well complemented that with a 29.8 rebound outing on 9 of 11 shooting with 2 threes for himself. OG Anunoby also added 24 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists, and 3 steals on 8 of 13 shooting with 3 threes. And Mikal Bridges had 16 points, 3 rebounds, and assists, while Josh Hart added 12 points, 6 rebounds, and assists, along with 3 steals himself. Mitchell Robinson also had 9 rebounds off the bench and continues a stretch of just horrific free throw shooting. There was a graphic mention that he was shooting less than 20% from the free throw line this year, despite him being around just average in terms of free throw percentage. Hakamich is going to be real, but again, not much of an impact in this case, luckily for them. As for the Magic, Jalen Suggs had 26 points and 7 assists on 10 of 16 shooting. Pretty impressive night, but again, just 1 point in what would be a limited second half for him, and it was detailed that he was dealing with a hip injury, which, again, if you have all of that wrapping around that area, I suppose that, from that perspective, makes sense. He is set to miss some time, as this Fox Sports report says from Bontemps of ESPN as well via that. Extended time to miss is possible. Truly, damn near full body wrapping all over him after that halftime period. There may be more to it at that point, and you just want to make sure, because this is a man that you invested a fairly sizable contract in. He's one of your core players. And you already dealt with a season last year with him missing an extended period of time up until the very end of the season. You want to do as much as you possibly can to get him right and avoid that kind of outcome happening again. Paolo Banchero in this game had 25 points, 8 rebounds, and 3 assists on 10 of 22 shooting. Desmond Bane had 18 points, 7 assists, and 6 rebounds on 7 of 17 shooting, and Wendell Carter Jr. added 14 points, 6 rebounds, and 2 assists, along with 4 steals, surprisingly enough, on 4 of 6 shooting. Even though those plays from Anthony Black were good at times, you can't have a game where you shoot 5 of 15 from the field. And also, when it comes to the spurts, a lot of those tie back again to them just continuing to settle. Now, with that laser-tight Knicks defense, and with having multiple shots getting swatted by Mitchell Robinson himself, some of those you just can't control. Fine. You're getting out-physicaled in that sense. The Knicks are ultimately going to get the upper hand there. But, again, other situations for them, like it's been for a while, you're just settling for these three-point shots, knowing that that is still not a strength for you right now. And with some of them not even being in the flow of the offense, you're just jacking them up just because. And that shit never works. That is not something that this Magic team, through the identity, if we can even say that they have one right now, that is not going to be something that your specific offense, with how your team is specifically constructed, you can't rely on that. You can't. Like, you've got to be a bit smarter than that in terms of shot selection. I mean, everything else was relatively even. They had a decent amount of paint points themselves. They didn't get totally beat in transition. They didn't totally get beaten in points off turnovers. And they had the same amount of rebounds. But you cannot, in a game where you have a team shooting that great from the field, even if 46.4% shooting is fairly routine for the NBA, you cannot get outpaced like that and expect to win when your entire goal is to limit those opportunities for other teams and have that kind of output on a typical NBA night. And they screwed up there. Truly. But we would get from that game into the final game with the Knicks clinching their spot in the NBA Cup Final. It would now be time to see who would do it between the Spurs and Thunder. Now, similar thing here. I did not start watching the entire thing. I got into it just a little bit late. But this matchup had all of the hype surrounding it as well. Like, I got so scared because, man, that shit, yes, this is not about the Lakers or Luka Doncic at all, but, man, after that event, whenever you see Shams Charania making a public appearance on a show, and you have a fucking breaking news ticker flashing, you gotta just be prepared for anything at this point. I've learned that since that period of time, and I think a lot of other people have dealt with the same thing. You just always have to caution yourself because you truly, when that happened, from that point forward, you never know. But all that breaking news was that Wembanyama was going to return from injury. He missed a ton of games down this stretch with injury, and the Spurs to that point had still been maintaining. The entire NBA has been flipped on its head when you consider that the Pistons are actually still one of the top teams in the overall league and the top team in the Eastern Conference as of the recording of this video. They play tonight as well. Unfortunately, won't be able to have that on. But that's craziness in and of itself. And then you have this game involving a Spurs team who had been one of the worst for the past couple years, but admittedly on the rise, still managing to come into this with a 17-7 record in one of the top 5 in the Western Conference, as tough as that shit is. Meanwhile, the Thunder are just head and shoulders above everybody else entering this game with one of the best marks through 25 games in NBA history at 24-1. And again, we've heard all the narratives at this point. They blow you out of the water. They don't have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander playing many fourth quarters. And even when they do, they still find a way to win the game. Even when you think for a second that you're going to pull off a comeback on this team, they find a way to win the game. They shut you down defensively, they turn you over, and they get points in transition on you. Matter of fact, we're talking about different metrics for these teams. The Thunder coming into this game were one of the top teams, if not the top team, in terms of points off of turnovers alone, with 25 per game? Fucking wild. Okay? So we knew what the game plan was there. But, hey, could things change when Wembanyama came back? Maybe. The tricky thing with that is that he was coming off of the bench. And so the Spurs would have to do as much as they could to get it done. And honestly, what you got in this overall game was truly a fucking slugfest. A hell of a dogfight that I think many people appreciated. It was that great of a ball game. Now, it didn't start off the cleanest for the Spurs. I thought this shit was a typo. They actually started out shooting, or going rather, all of 11 from 3. And outside of that, even with the shots that they were making, the Thunder were on it every single time. Do you know how crazy that is? Like, I didn't see an open look for them for a while. Every shot was contested. They didn't give you much room for anything. And you got to credit the Spurs for being able to settle in at multiple points and make those shots. It was a 17-6 Thunder run that they had to deal with for a while. And even after that, they still started to temper it, whether it was Devin Vassell getting some tough mid-range shots in, whether it was De'Aaron Fox getting a turnaround shot, and also, they started to hit a couple threes with Stephon Castle and Keldon Johnson getting a couple to go. Eventually, this got down to an 11-point lead at the end of the quarter, and with the way that the Spurs had been turning the ball over as well, and that would bleed into the start of the second quarter, their points off of turnovers, OKC, ended up being the margin for the game for a little bit. So they were inevitably going to have to calm that down in order to make things happen. However, man, Wembanyama, it is not all about the Victor Wembanyama show, per se, but in reality, especially with as far as this game went, one could say that was the case. Things completely changed around for the Spurs team as soon as he got in. And it's like, knowing that he's coming off the bench, the Thunder did the right thing in winning the non-Wemby minutes. But at the same time, he didn't even have to make as many shots early in this game for him to immediately start having an impact. The lead was immediately shortened as soon as he got in, with other players stepping up and hitting shots. But the Thunder still managed to have enough control for a while to create the distance needed to win the game. But both teams, even if you didn't necessarily see it, through the numbers, both teams were unrelenting. Especially when you look at what Stephon Castle was doing. One of the first shots he made in the second quarter literally saw him drive to the bucket, get a sort of gather step, get a deep move off one foot into the painted area, and with a contest from one of the OKC defenders, have to pivot his body mid-air, spin around, and get the layup off the bucket. Or later on in the second quarter, you have another situation. Now he's against one of their bigs, and he manages to still put enough pressure on the defense to muscle his way into another contested, tough, but effective layup for his style. They were going through a cycle of nicknames for this Spurs team overall, and some of them I actually didn't understand. But Slash Brothers for both Stephon Castle and Dylan Harper, that makes tremendous sense, especially with what they would both go on to do throughout the rest of the game from this point. Especially Stephon Castle at this point, man. Like, he kind of had that reputation coming out of UConn. And the issue for him has been to develop a three-point shot, develop his playmaking out, which he also had some tough stretches in this one. One of the first plays in the game saw him actually get lurked massively by Isaiah Hartenstein off a rotation from the three-point line. That was unexplainable. He threw it right at him. That kind of stuff, those lapses are just not very good. But he managed to turn it around, and he thugged it out. Especially with how he would get bloodied, battered, and bruised by the end of this game. But that's a different story for a different day. The Spurs got a nice stretch, a very nice stretch, to close out the second quarter, though. Despite suffering a 14-2 run earlier in this point, with Wembanyama back in and just sitting around, staring down Isaiah Hartenstein and pulling up, kicking the leg out for a deep three-pointer. That would cap off what would be a 10-0 run for San Antonio to make this a three-point ball game heading into halftime. Like, it very quickly turned into just one of those games between two of the best teams in the NBA. And I don't think that's something that you can really disrespect. You can't knock that. Like, that was a quality basketball game. It was not supposed to be pretty. You got some of the signatures from Shai Gilgeous-Alexander doing what he does best. Inevitably, down the stretch of the game, he would get his 20-point mark, giving him his 97th consecutive game with at least 20, and that stands to be the second most right now, behind Wilt Chamberlain's 126-game streak between 1961 and 1962. That can probably be broken, and we make all the jokes about Chamberlain's records being completely unbreakable. That seems attainable for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander right now. It seems very attainable. Like, it just comes naturally for him. Even if he plays in limited minutes, barely plays in any fourth quarters, you can almost pencil him in to get his on every single night. And it's not up for debate at that point. But the Spurs, despite all of that, despite the strength of this overall team, despite the will of this defense completely testing them entirely, they took the lead at multiple points in this third quarter, and they actually started to make some space once Dylan Harper would get his own action going. Stephon Castle continued to get work done, and even Devin Vassell got a three off of a solid pass from Victor Wembanyama here to extend the lead. But the flurries and the haymakers from both squads just would not stop. Jalen Williams, for example, towards the tail end was able to punch back, but even there was a response later on from De'Aaron Fox getting a pair of free throws to cap off the third quarter and give them a 78-77 lead. Man, this fourth quarter would be a wild ride, to say the least, for them. A wild ride. Victor Wembanyama would display his hate for Chet Holmgren by packing the shit out of him. And then getting out and just hitting some of the wildest shots imaginable throughout this fourth quarter. Some of the wildest shots. I mean, the question about any 7-footer is going to lead back in some way, shape, or form to coordination. In some way, shape, or form. A lot have been going down to this point. They were trying their best to get everybody else on the Spurs at that point when Wembanyama was on the court to contribute. Do not allow Victor Wembanyama to get his way. Make him work for the points. Understandable. And at points, they did make that happen. You had Caruso towards the tail end get a steal on Victor Wembanyama for a crucial junction. You had Lucian Dort actually get up and block a Victor Wembanyama shot just as he was rising up the ball off of a fake to inevitably dunk it. That was pretty impressive. But then you also had moments where the man would just, fake a no-look pass into a fadeaway shot on Isaiah Hartenstein. Or you would have a situation where Caruso nearly made him lose the ball and without hesitation got it back. Got a fadeaway look with perfect form and still had the fucking ball swirl around the net. Cash fucking money. What are you supposed to do about that at that point? What are you supposed to do? Shit was wild. But mentioning Alex Caruso, even he had a moment where he just would heat up completely, continuing to be a reliable force as a two-way player of sorts, man. He had a stretch by himself where he accounted for a fast break dunk, and then also got a zip of a pass from Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in another transition situation to get one of the easier makes he'll have in his NBA career. All he had to do was just volleyball it back up off the backboard into the bucket. But man, the Spurs would continue to go blow for blow in charge right the fuck back. Stephon Castle would get a sideline out of bounds alley-oop to Victor Wembanyama over Chet Holmgren, because of course it was. To tie the ball game at that point. Despite them suffering what would be an 11-3 run earlier, now the Spurs had a little bit of an advantage in this one. Ultimately, it would get into free throws for a long while. I mean, neither team, with how close this game was, neither team wanted to truly give their opponent another chance to take control here. Victor Wembanyama would eventually get himself 15 points in the fourth quarter. And overall, when you look at it, I'll get into the numbers. Like, his impact, if he had played this entire game, would be on even greater display. But that punch off the bench, even if it wasn't expected, was well needed for the Spurs team. The Thunder were in danger, though, given this entire situation. They would go on to lose their 16-game winning streak and suffer just their second loss of the season, 111-109. Now, there was a bit of controversy. Alex Caruso was in position to get a sort of quick tip off of a miss from Jalen Williams' free throw, intentionally, of course. He felt as though he was kind of pushed out by Devin Vassell's forearm, and upon the replay, I mean, it kind of looks that way. But in the moment, in real time, I don't know if anybody could have made that out. Nonetheless, the Spurs would get the win. A strong win at that. Man, even without Lee truly being safe in the NBA, they were able to hold on. And man, what a performance from them. Like, this was just a grit and grind game through and through. Through and through. No real advantage everywhere. I mean, literally, everything. Everything for this game was mostly even, aside from free throw percentage. When you look at it, everything was close. It comes down at the end of the day to players dictating exactly how the game will end up. And when you look at the Spurs players, Vassell, Castle, Fox, and Wembanyama all had over 20 points in this game. All of them. All on respectable field goal percentage. And all of them had their own impacts in terms of going on to win this. Vassell, for example, had 23 points, 5 rebounds, and 4 assists on 6 of 13 shooting, along with 4 threes. Pretty impressive considering some of the shots that he was forced to go out there and get, not be given throughout the day. Or Castle as well, just getting it out of the mud at the rim. Time and again for a 22.6 rebound and 2 assist night on 9 of 16 shooting with 2 threes rather. De'Aaron Fox had 22 points and 4 assists along with 2 steals on 8 of 15 shooting. And Victor Wembanyama had 22 points, 9 rebounds, 2 assists, and 2 blocks off the bench on a pivotal plus 20 box plus minus. Again, maybe that stat line is not everything. Maybe box plus minus might not be everything as a stat line. But to know that you are waiting at least a 20-point advantage in any capacity, whether you're starting or not, to a team in limited action, in a game that was that tight, where every single play mattered. Like, that is where you have to take it outside of just the offense. Every single play mattered. Every single bucket. Every single defensive stop. Every single steal. Every single play in this one had an overall impact in how this would end up going. And you have that kind of gravity. They actually had a graphic stating that he is one of the top 10 players in terms of gravity added to a team this season. So, I mean, yeah, there's even more to it. You just can't quantify that sometimes. That just attempts to. And you felt it throughout the game. Truly. As for the Thunder, man, similar thing here. Like, they still got it done. Yes, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander had 29, 5 in 4 on 12 of 23 shooting. Chet Holmgren and Jalen Williams had 17 points on interesting shot diets. Chet Holmgren shot only 36% from the field, while Jalen Williams shot 5 of 16 from the field. Holmgren also had 10 free throws. Do with that what you will. Alex Caruso also added 11 points off the bench, and Isaiah Hartenstein had 10 points and 9 rebounds. Just think about this, and I said this after the game as well. Yo, it took you to resort to this. And again, the Spurs team is great in their own right. But it took this for them to suffer their second loss of the season. It took this, where they still had a damn good chance to grind it out and win their damn selves. Still. And it's crazy. Like, both of these games that they lost, because the last one actually managed to see them lose to the Trailblazers, also by 2 points. Like, you don't get off easy when facing off against this Oklahoma City team. You just don't. They'll blow you out. They'll win the tight matches more often than they don't. But even if you manage to get out with the win, you ain't going to win by much. 4 points is the only thing, are the only things rather, standing in between them having a 24-2 record overall and completely being undefeated right now. And that's considered a potential off night for them. I mean, that is ridiculous to think about. And this was a physical ball game too. Both teams had their scars in this one. And again, Wembanyama continued to take it to Chet Holmgren. But again, spitting image of the night. Castle had a bloody lip, had a fucking nosebleed, and some sort of napkin, paper towel, whatever, just completely stuffed inside his nose to prevent the bleeding from spilling out. That's how physical that game was. But it was definitely a great one to watch, to say the least. And with that, we decided that the Spurs and the Knicks would be facing off against each other in the NBA Cup Final. And man, hey, bro. We know how great the Christmas Day game between the Spurs and the Knicks was last year. Along with Jalen Brunson in a different matchup between the Spurs and the Knicks a while back, managing to put up 60 points, while Wembanyama essentially had 40 and 20. Like, they go at it. So that matchup should be exciting. Absolutely. I mean, there is no question about that, man. That's gonna be some fun. I'm telling you right now. But that would do it for the game action that I watched. As for a few developments, Robert Williams III was questionable with an illness, but would play in yesterday's match between the Warriors. And boy, even without watching it, all I gotta say is right now, Stephen Curry has had multiple games in his career where he's had at least 12 three-pointers. He's now the first player to put that up in a performance and lose a game. So yeah, that's like, come on, that's fucking wild. Okay. Robert Williams himself contributed like 11 points on perfect shooting from the field, so that's good. That's promising. I wonder if the Blazers have tried to have lineups where they've put both Klingon and Williams out in rotations together. My estimation is that probably, for spacing reasons, would never be done. But on the defensive front, especially with Robert Williams III being athletic but undersized, that could be a little interesting. Tyrese Maxey would be deemed out with an illness. There were reports from, I think, Mavericks beat writers, reporters, and other insiders essentially stating that there is no current timetable for Kyrie Irving's return, even though one could assume that he would be slated to come back in like January at some point, given the exact timing of when his injury took place. And I mean, the Mavericks, I don't know, Cooper Flagg, by the way, even without having watched the Mavericks game in a while, it appears as though he is starting to get it figured out. So that is promising to see, at the very least. They also have this entire thing going on with Anthony Davis. We are now running with a potential narrative of him getting traded to the Pistons. So, a lot is going on there. But some of that could at the very least be alleviated if Irving is able to return. They are definitely banking on it, and that's not a great thing, by the way. But, I don't know. As long as there is an idea of it eventually, it instills some hope in those guys, I suppose. LaMelo Ball would be out with an ankle injury. Anthony Edwards would be out eventually with a foot injury. Joel Embiid would be questionable with a knee injury, but would actually play in this game against the Hawks yesterday night. He had a 22-point and 14 rebound game on 8 of 20 shooting. Not necessarily the best for him. Not the worst, considering especially some of what I've seen from him on the court. Because in different games, it has looked as though he can barely move at all. And another thing to note about that game, even without watching it, unrelated point kinda, but tying it in. Alright, I'm gonna say this right now, and I think All-Star voting is probably a few short weeks away. If Jalen Johnson is not on your All-Star ballot, I advise you to strongly reconsider that. Strongly. This is his 4th straight triple-double. He has been on the fucking ball all season long. And again, he was on the tear last season before he got injured, averaging at least 20, 10, and 5. Well, now it's getting completely improved while being, again, a perfect complement to Trae Young. And again, from my standpoint, in a way, now there are going to be questions. Because if you have this going on with Jalen Johnson leading the squad in this manner, having the most consecutive triple-doubles in Hawks history, and just being a relentless force on defense at the same time, I'm like, dude, there might be the understanding from some upper members in the organization that, okay, do we really look at Trae Young the same after this kind of tear? I wouldn't be surprised if that was something brewing right now. But nevertheless, man, Jalen Johnson, all-star that nigga. All-star. Like, come on. All-star that man. Collin Sexton would be out with a quad injury. Khris Middleton would be out with a knee injury. Oubre Jr. would also be out with a knee injury. And Evan Mobley, per an MRI and per a report from, I believe, Shams Charania, he would miss, or is set to miss rather, the next 2 to 4 weeks with a calf strain. That could be brutal for them. The main thing is that he gets far better in that time and is able to get back on the court with perfect health. That's the most important thing. But I don't know how much the Cavs would need that right now. They are already on the lower end in the Eastern Conference, and they damn near got taken to the brink by the Wizards. The Wizards. It took them scoring, or Donovan Mitchell rather, scoring 48 points in that game just for them to win. Then they just dropped a game to the Hornets yesterday by 8 in overtime. So it's safe to say with someone who is that great defensively, you are certainly going to need it. I mean, come on. Just think about this. As great as Brandon Miller is, you think he's going to grab 13 rebounds against Evan Mobley? You think Miles Bridges is going to grab 10 rebounds against Evan Mobley? No, that's not happening. So it's definitely going to leave him a little weaker there, and you're already kind of seeing it, right? You would hope if you are Cleveland, that you can at least weather the storm without him. But I don't. That's gonna be tough. Like, we are dealing with the reigning DPOY here. You don't just, especially with some of the other guys that they have. Sure, Evan Mobley, Jared Allen is a great compliment in and of itself, but at the true power forward position, like, no, you don't have a true replacement for that kind of impact on your team. Brandon Clarke as well is doubtful to return with a knee injury today, as of the recording of this video. He'd been dealing with knee synovitis, and he had to get that hashed out, repaired. All signs, I guess, could, in a way, depending on how things are, point to him returning sooner rather than later. But I guess it'd be their decision tonight on whether or not he will be a go against the Clippers. But that'll do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.